They don't know me yet, and I think you guys can appreciate my willingness to want to start on time and not being interrupted. But also at 7:30 in the morning, there's no class before. The parking lot's, like, there's no excuse. I understand, getting to 8:30 and there might be more issues, but I'm a little bit more lenient on that. Would I like to not be interrupted? Yes. But am I a little bit more lenient for you guys? Yes. So don't tell the other kids, all right? All right, a couple things. One is, it is hard. I get asked a lot to help promote jobs, tech jobs or other jobs, and I want to. Most of them are former students, and I want to help them, and I want to help you guys. But with my dyslexia, it's hard to remember. I have to email 5 different sections, and sometimes it's hard to remember how I emailed this, that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post all of the job opportunities on this class. This class has an Instagram page that previous students started to do practice and examples. It ended up being more trouble than it's worth for a lot of reasons, so we haven't posted on there in a while. So what I'm going to do is when there's a new job, I'm going to post on that page, and it'll be more like a job posting page. I also asked our women in kinesiology, y'all posted a couple jobs that are available. So it's a KNES 310_415. If you're looking for tech jobs, like I'm going to start posting, but they come in probably once a week. So I'll post them on there, and that way I don't have to try to remember to email all the different classes. All right, let's make some sense of all this. All right, let's try to put a bow into all the things that we've been talking about so far. I love the confirmation that we're going in the right direction. Okay? For the test, all I'm asking you to do is understand concepts that will lead us to better understanding how muscles influence motion through contraction. That's it. If it doesn't lead us to how muscles influence motion through contraction, I don't have time for it. Everything that we're talking about leads to the same end result. Okay? So I'm going to try if I can figure out technology. Did I do it? Yay! So, moment rotational force is a linear force times a perpendicular distance. Okay? So, in other words, when we talk about rotational forces, linear forces are in that conversation. It's part of it, but it's not all of it, but it's part of it. Bless you. So in other words, there is some linearity to rotation. I mean, any force is linear, but a force applied perpendicular to an axis now becomes angular. It doesn't diminish that linear push or pull. It's like this. In high school or college, y'all learned of tangential velocity. It's a fancy word to basically say when something is rotating, any part along that path, if I release the ball, it's going to go in a straight line. Okay? So moment is rotational influence. But at its core, it's made up of linear forces. And those linear forces become rotational forces when they have perpendicular distance. No perpendicular distance, no rotational force. Let's look at this example from class, and we're going to apply all of the different concepts we've learned. Linear kinetics, straight line forces. The padding is trying to push the feet down. It's not a false statement. The feet feel a downward force from the padding. Here, the padding is trying to push the feet back. Straight line conversation. The feet are trying to push the pad forward. The feet are trying to push the pad up. Now, the feet, shouldn't that be shins? All right, I think you know what I'm talking about, okay? The shins are just representation of the muscles. True? If you watch MMA and someone does a shin kick, like that shin is a representation of the muscles that produce the motion. Like that shin's like, I come in peace. Psych! The padding is a representation of that weight stack in the same way. Linear kinetics, straight line forces. Forces influence motion. F is equal to ma. Straight line forces influence straight line motion. Thus, this force is trying to push the shins down. The shins are trying to push the pad up. Linear kinematics, straight line motion conversations. Well, what's the position? Well, I'm at the highest position that my feet could get in this exercise. What about change in position? My feet start to go down, but then my feet start to go back. You get the point? Straight line forces influence straight line motion. The padding is not trying to push. If I'm flex, like let's say I'm just 5 degrees off of being at 90, right? Or let's say I'm at 90. That padding is no longer trying to push my feet down. That's all I'm saying. So linear kinematics, ups, downs, fronts, backs. In mechanics, we do positive X and negative. In our world, we're going to be using ups, downs, fronts, backs. That's okay. Straight line forces influence straight line motion. When we get into the trick part, all I'm going to try to show you is that like halfway, some of that force is trying to make you go down, and some of that force is trying to make you go back. Here, it was all trying to make you go down. Here, it's trying to all make you go back. So what happens when you're halfway? It's going less and less down, more and more back. All back, no down. That's where we're going to look at trig and angles and how angles influence components. Angular kinetics and kinematics. This is the harder part. It's really not hard. It's really common sense. In 310, we use words like, what is the external force trying to do to your joints? That is an angular kinetic concept. What is that linear force trying to spin you? How is it trying to rotate you? Angular kinematics is just, are you flexing or are you extending? It doesn't matter what's doing it. It doesn't matter who's winning. It doesn't matter anything. Is there flexion? Is there extension? Is there no rotation? So when I say things like in 310, what is the external force trying to do to your knees? You would say it's trying to, and the only way it can try to flex you is if it has a moment, if it has a torque. It's inferred. It's no different, like I said, with the 40-yard dash, and that's what this slide is there for. But I think now is a great time to talk about it. These are just examples of inference. We're all displacing the same, so variations in time infers changes in speed. Right? You run the 100 in less time, you're going to be going faster. So we do the same thing with torques and moments. Guys, we're not going to be there to measure everything. What is the external forces trying to do to you is an angular kinetic conversation. How is it trying to torque you? How is it trying to create a moment on you? So the padding working through the plate is trying to flex me. That is a rotational force. If the padding was pushing on my knees, would it be trying to flex me? Would it be trying to flex my knees if it was pushing here? No, it has to have a perpendicular distance to try to flex me. You see how moment is inferred. If a force is trying to rotate your joint, that's a moment. That's a torque. That's an angular kinetic thing. Even though we have motion embedded in there, moments in mechanics are clockwise and counterclockwise moments. But you know what else is clockwise and counterclockwise motion? So if the force is trying to rotate you, that's what a moment is. The motion itself, I have extension, I have flexion. That's angular kinematics. I am flexed. My knees are flexed. My knees are anatomical. My knees are extended. You take out a goniometer and you measure the flexion and the extension. That's angular kinematics. But when a force is trying to rotate you, that's what a moment is. And if the force is not trying to rotate you, that's a moment. The moment would just be zero. It's not trying to rotate you. So in this one example, we have linear kinetics, up-down forces influence up-down motion, front-back forces influence front-back motion. I can't push this cart in the front back and make it want to go up and down. That's as easy as I could say it. But in the realm of rotation, we don't have to measure things. We just have to say, is that force trying to spin your joint? And if the answer is yes, then there's a moment. There's a torque. Let's do another practice. I love practice. Let's do this practice. Is that dumbbell trying to rotate the shoulder? No. So the moment at the shoulder is trying to translate the shoulder, right? It's trying to dislocate the shoulder, but it's not trying to rotate it. Does that make sense? What is that dumbbell trying to rotate? A trunk. And again, you can do thought experiments for all these examples. He has it in his left hand. If he relaxes all the muscles at his trunk, the weight is going to bend him to the left. True? So that dumbbell, that extra unbalanced force, is creating a left lateral trunk bending moment. It's trying to rotate the trunk. His muscles, to prevent that, are creating a right lateral bending moment. If he's going to stay in that position, or if he's going to let it go down eccentrically, he's going to make it come up concentrically. In other words, is the dumbbell providing a linear force? Yes, but that linear force has a perpendicular distance at his spine. And that's why it's trying to create a rotational force at the trunk. Are the muscles providing linear forces? Sure, but the muscles on the right side are pulling on ribs, and the ribs have a perpendicular distance from the trunk. That's why those muscles have moment at the trunk. We did this in 310. We're just giving words to those concepts. External force is trying to create a torque to his left lateral, and so his muscles need to create a torque in the direction of right lateral. Linearly, outside of multiplying it times the perpendicular distance to give it a moment, well, there is no moment, well, the moment is zero at the shoulder, but that force is trying to do something at the shoulder. It's called this. And so one thing I'm going to teach when we go through the specific muscles is how those muscles have pull-it angles, and some of that component, this is the trick part, some of that component of the pull has no moment. That's great, because that means it's trying to keep it in the socket. stability. That's what that is, stability component of muscles pull. And then we're going to have rotary component of muscles pull. That's moment. Okay? So on the test, come on, Campbell, just tell me what you're going to ask on the test. I can't tell you exactly what I'm going to ask, but I can tell you the types of questions I'm going to ask. Can you identify linear kinetics, linear kinematics, straight line position, change in position, displacement? How much time did it take you to displace velocity? How much time did it take you to change your velocity acceleration? If I give you an example or a concept, can you slot it into the 4 categories? Straight line forces affect straight line motion. And we have terms for those things. Pushes and pulls and gravity, that's all straight line forces. Now, those straight line forces, when multiplied by a perpendicular distance, can create rotational forces. Angular kinetics. Questions, as I'm telling you, I'm going to ask these kind of questions on the test. What is the machine or the padding trying to do to your knees? That's an angular kinetic question. Think about it. Well, Campbell, it's trying to flex you. Wouldn't flexion make it kinematic? I didn't say it was flexing. I just said it was trying to. I'm trying to open the jar of mayonnaise or the pickles, or my wife loves pickles. I'm trying to open it. I'm creating a rotational force. But that doesn't mean it's opening. That doesn't mean motion is happening. Maybe it happens. But what's trying to rotate you is not the same as is it. We're good? So trying to flex my knees is not a kinematic conversation. Angular kinematics is just, I observe knee flexion. I observe knee extension, actual motion. I had the same position in my knees. What's trying to flex you and extend you, whether that's muscles or external influences, those are angular forces. Those are torques. That's what angular kinetics is. So, applying to 310. The machine is trying to flex me. Angular kinetic. My muscles are trying to extend me. Angular kinetic. I observe flexion. Angular kinematic. I observe extension. Angular kinematic. I'm in an extended position. Angular kinematic. I'm in a flex position. Angular kinematic. My feet are up. Linear kinematic. My arm is down. Make sense? Is that a better understanding of how I'm going to be asking these questions? Any clarification? I'm going to give you examples, just like on 310. But all I'm asking you to do is to be able to sort straight line forces with straight line motion. The padding is pushing down, thus it's trying to make my leg go down. The padding is pushing to your left, thus trying to make my leg go to my left. That's linear talk. Notice, the pad is trying to flex me the whole time, so the rotational stuff stays the same. But the linear stuff can change. And that's exactly, I actually mentioned this in 310. That's why we learn joint motions on spin and not linear concepts. Abduction is away from the midline. Yeah, until you keep abducting and it comes back. The spin was the same. This is what you don't say. Ab, going away. Oh, add, coming back. That would be like saying clockwise, 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 counterclockwise, counterclockwise, counterclockwise. Brr. And that's why we can't say abduction is going away or going up or coming back. We can't do those things because the linear kinetics and kinematics change. Another example. Sorry, Mr. Clock. $5 at Walmart. We don't say flexion is hand go forward. Why? Because if I keep flexing, hand go back. It's caveman talk. But for non-kinesiology senior level students, we have to see the spin. The flexion is the same spin as when the hand was going forward and when the hand was going back. Yes? That's all I'm saying. So when we talk about joints, muscles influencing motion through contraction, we're about to have a lot of angular, kinetic, and kinematic conversations. But it's not to say we dismiss linear stuff. My coaches, my athletic trainers, you're going to be using layman's terms all the time. You can't just say, technically, son, 12-year-old, you got to counterclockwise the first angulate. It's that. My roommate in college, his dad was a vet. And he said, he gave me a piece of advice that I still try to apply today. He said there was a new veterinarian that just graduated school, coming in the clinic, get some experience. And this little kid brought in a little bird that was sick. And he said that young vet was over-treating the bird. Like he tried to do this and this and this because he cared. He wanted to save the bird. But to that bird was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'd rather die. And he just croaked out, bro. That bird was like, I'm out. He overtreated the bird. I'm not saying we have to overtreat our clients. I'm not saying we have to overtreat our patients. But if we can see what's happening, it will help us be better when we do work with them. I'm not saying you have to use this verbiage, but we got to understand and see this verbiage. All right, so let's apply this concept to and y'all, it might be in the text I just did. Probably that's very natural. Come on, guys. Let's try this. Okay, let's try to spell it better this time. Zarban's okay. All right, yeah, let's use this one. Let's use this one. Google is awesome, guys. Google can give you so many examples, and even if it's examples that we don't do in class, like that's why I'm here. Is there a moment at the knee in this position? What does a moment mean? A rotational influence. Is that ankle cuff, along with the mass of the leg, trying to rotate the knee? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Would it be trying to rotate the knee more or less if she flexed the knee down to here? Yeah, it would be less here than here, but it's the same weight. The leg didn't get bigger or smaller. The cuff didn't get more massive or less massive. The weight stayed the same, but the moment fluctuated. The linear kinetics stayed the same, but the angular kinetic changed as she flexes and extends. Layman's terms, guys, watch. Let's say, it's kind of, sometimes you don't feel it if it's a light. Let's say I had a 100-pound cuff on my leg, right? First of all, there's no way I'm holding this position. Probably not going to get my knee into a fully extended position. You know that. You feel that. So why can I maintain this position, but I can't maintain that position? Weight stayed the same, but the moment changed. As I extend, it's getting further and further and further away. It's creating more and more and more perpendicular distance. That force that stays the same, the weight, is amplified by a greater and greater and greater perpendicular distance. So when you combine those things together, you get a greater moment. So if the external moment gets harder and harder and harder as I extend, what do you think the internal moment has to do with my muscles? They have to pull with more and more and more force. They pull where they pull. My quads can't say, you know what? I'm really at a disadvantage here. Let me detach and go attach further away, right? You got what you got. So the only way your muscles can counter greater external torque is to pull harder. That's your only option.
So, perpendicular distance influences the moment?
Say that again?
Is it true that the perpendicular distance influences the moment?
It is the most important component in all that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can apply, let me rearrange the, and that's such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it. I'm going to try it. I work in analogies. I can push with as much force as I can. It doesn't mean I'm trying to open the door. Thanks, Lord. This is the axis of rotation. Perpendicular distance. You know what else would not try to open or close the door if I did this? Parallel distance, that's great for stability, but that's not great for angular rotation. The perpendicular distance is the most important thing. It's not diminishing force, but like I said, this is going to stay the same in this exercise. So I have to be aware as clinicians, future therapists, athletic trainers, personal trainers, of the limitations of certain exercises at certain degrees of, at certain angles. I hate to do this, but I'm going to say, we know that we're working our quad in this exercise, right? But we're not working it the same through the whole range of motion. I'm going to be working it more when my leg is extended, and I'm going to be working it less when my leg is flexed. In fact, if you keep flexing, you're no longer working your quad. You'll be working your hamstrings now, right? Because gravity is now trying to extend you. By understanding limitations, it gives you tools to be able to do some cool stuff. What I mean by that is, let's say, and I mentioned this last week, but I teach in repetition. Let's say you know that the moment is going to be less here. Well, maybe this is where you want to supply a little manual resistance. You're trying to make them flex because gravity can't when I'm here. You're supplying an external torque. You're supplying an angular kinetic influence so that those muscles can keep supplying an angular kinetic resistance.
Is that how you mentioned, like, whenever you're using the leg-centered machine, it has like a constant moment on your shin?
Absolutely. Yeah. And remember, this class is not trying to tell you what's greater than what. It's about telling you the pros and cons, the limitations of certain things, linearly and angularly, so that we can see, oh, I don't have to supply an external moment because in this machine, gravity pulling down on the stack, the pulleys and levers redirecting the padding to pull down, just like our muscles pull and we can redirect it through the shin, is trying to flex me. It's still trying to flex me. Gravity can't do that. So it's much better, the machines are much better at maintaining consistent moment. What's the trade-off? They're expensive and they take up a lot of space. And you can't exactly do home health with elderly by rolling up with an 18-wheeler of stuff. So we need to learn, well, what can I do? Well, you can supply a manual resistance at certain points in the range of motion or reposition them so that, the first few reps, maybe you don't even go all the way down because it doesn't matter. That's useless. So maybe the first repetitions, you just do ranges of motion that the moment is going to, and then you reposition them where in a flexed position, that's the greatest moment trying to flex. And if I'm laying on my back, and I say, you do, guys, y'all have enough life data. If I'm laying on my back, now when I'm extended, in an extended anatomical position, gravity's not trying to flex me. It's trying to flex me here. So by repositioning the patient, you can create equal moments at different ranges of motion. I love it because usually those questions are awesome.
No, I really just don't understand like in this example, like, I get the end, right, something like.
No, it's my job to make it make sense. So it's not you, it's me. The linear would be gravity is pulling straight down as we see it, right? Gravity is trying to make this ankle weight go down. Gravity is trying to make the foot go down. The foot is trying to make the ankle weight go up. Okay? Now, once we have a linear force, because all forces are linear, and all forces, if you've ever asked someone to define something, sometimes defining things are hard. Like, what is time? What is time, right? What is a force? Well, it's like a push or a pull. Like, you give examples, but what is it? It's an influencer of motion. Forces influence motion. So in a linear context, planet Earth is trying to pull this weight down. My foot is trying to push the weight up. That linear up and down multiplied by a moment arm, a perpendicular distance, now creates torque at the knee. If she was in a flexed position right here, gravity's not trying to flex or extend my knee, true. But you know what it's still trying to do? Pull down. Here, that straight force is trying to spin me. Here, that same straight force is not trying to spin me. Okay, let's do it as a yes or no. Yes or no, the straight line force is trying to rotate my knee. Yes or no, in this picture. Okay, let's pretend, I think that's a Waterboy reference. Let's pretend now she's in this position and her foot is off the ground. Yes or no, is that weight now trying to flex or extend me? Exactly. And if it's not trying to flex or extend me, that means it's not trying to spin me. It's not trying to rotate me. It's the same force. It's the same linear force, but when I don't give it a perpendicular distance, when I don't give it a moment arm, there's no rotation that's trying to happen because of that force. Remember the example? I hope y'all won some prizes. Remember the thing we did in class the other day? It's very similar. Pushing my hand down is linear, but pushing my hand down far away from my shoulder is angular. Pulling my arm down is linear, but by pulling my arm down, it's not trying to rotate my shoulder. Thus, no angle. So in the case of the machine, one of the reasons machines, positives about machines is, yes, gravity is trying to pull that weight stack down, but the machine redirects the pulleys so that the padding is trying to push me down here, but the padding is trying to push me back right there. Gravity can't do that. Gravity can't change from trying to pull him down and then trying to pull him across. Does that make sense? So the torque from the external force stays more consistent because the direction stays perpendicular. No different than if you were doing a manual muscle test on someone, and let's say you asked them to abduct their arm, right? That's an angular kinematic concept. Don't let me push you down. But what if you wanted to test their strength here? You wouldn't push or pull down. You'd want to push and pull in to create the same moment. Don't let me push your hand to your side. Don't let me push your hand down. The moment, the torque, the rotational influence stayed similar because you're able to change your linear direction of your force. Gravity can't. Gravity is like, I got what I got. And it's up to you to reposition yourself knowing my limitations of influence. Does that make more sense? Guys, I so appreciate it. There's so many times where I'm dying for clarifications because I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if, I know I'm trying to get y'all to Shreveport, but if I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, I need y'all to be like, I think we varied off the course here. Can we, oh, okay, great. And I'm trying to get us back to I-49, okay? Love the feedback. So the application, or the so what, is in different exercises, we have to understand the straight line forces can create rotational forces. A straight line force that has no perpendicular distance is not trying to spin nothing. I don't mean to go into non-English speak, but sometimes sometimes hearing things out of normal sequence makes it more palatable. And I don't understand English very well. A straight line force that's not trying to rotate you is not a moment. A straight line force that's not trying to spin you is not a torque. A straight line force that's not trying to create joint motion is not angular. It can be linear, but it has to have a moment arm. It has to try to be rotating you to be angular. And so again, the confusing part, somebody give me a, wait, I think I have one here, because your first muscles of the body are going to be cervical. So watch, here we go. Linear, if he has a bruise on his forehead, he's going to feel that because of a linear push. If he has a broken hand, he's going to feel that because of a linear push. But that linear push is trying to extend his cervical vertebra. That's rotation. The force multiplied by the perpendicular distance is trying to create rotation. So if his external force is trying to rotate him into extension, what does his internal forces have to be doing? Trying to flex him. If he applied his force, he wouldn't do that. In fact, let me go to the side. This analogy will make more sense. Let's say his external force moves from high up on his neck to extremely low on his neck. Like it may not be trying to right laterally bend. Does that make sense? 408, trying to do, oh gosh, that didn't sound good. External force, trying to create this moment. Internal muscles, trying to create that moment. Even though they are linear forces. Because the linear times the perpendicular creates angular.
I have a boy that's up my head like an example.
Come on, give it, give it.
I compare it kind of like a seesaw,
Okay.
and I have to show you.
No, come on. I love seesaws. Not anymore, my knees. No, I love it. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yes. Yes. May I?
Yeah.
All right, no, this is awesome. And this will help us have conversations. Watch this play. Let's see if I.
Don't mind it, guys.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. And you gave me permission, so you can't take it back. No, this is awesome. So check this out. First of all, it doesn't matter. We could call it person one, person two, external, internal. This is analogies. What's the linear force? Gravity, pull him down. What does the seesaw feel? The seesaw feels a push from that person. If that person was standing in the middle of the seesaw, would that person be trying to rotate the seesaw? No. But that person still would be supplying a linear force. That person is still trying to push the seesaw into the ground. But once I give perpendicular distance, that linear force gets amplified by perpendicular distance, and now we're trying to spin. And this is a great analogy of our body. We're going to have external forces that sometimes try to make our seesaw spin. And thus we're going to have internal muscles that are trying to either allow it or cause it or prevent it from spinning. But we're also going to have forces that are trying to disassociate our seesaw. We're going to have forces, ground reaction forces, external forces, that are trying to break our seesaw. And so some of that muscle's pull isn't just influencing the rotation of the seesaw, it's maintaining the integrity of the seesaw. Making sure that this bone stays articulated with this bone. Making sure that this bone stays articulated with that bone. Making sure that this bone doesn't do this about that bone. So yes, muscles influence rotation angularly, which I love with the seesaw, but muscles will also, I'm going to show you how they maintain stability through their linear pull of bone up against bone. Make sense? That's a great thing. Okay, and now you're right, tell us now. Man, I do that with my kids all the time, and they're like 17 and 14, like, Dad, stop being a dad. But dad jokes are fun. How many of you guys, did I do the old hand tap trick for you guys? There's going to be certain positions that your joints are more vulnerable to injury. For females, I work female sports all through graduate school. ACL tears in ladies. It's not when your legs are in an extended position. It's when you're flexed and you have certain muscles that are trying to rotate. The ground is preventing this from happening. Your quad is literally trying to pull the bottom part of your shin forward, and the muscles in the back don't activate in time to prevent that translation, and what you have is the quad does this. Dislocations. When an elbow dislocates, it's usually in a flexed position because those muscles that cross it are in a better rotational position and less of a stability position. And I think this example serves it up. Don't let me push your hands apart. You're providing an up and down force, but my force is across. It's going to get you every time. That was horrible. You're not going to injure yourself every time. Think of it like this. People who are trying to do great feats of strength, like pulling cars and trucks. You ever seen that? Someone will pull an airplane? That does not impress me. Like Shania Twain, that don't impress me much. You know what I want to see them do? Lift it up. Yo, pick that plane up. That's what I want to see. You so bad? Lift that truck up. You notice, I didn't try to pull your hands apart like this. Your force was in the Y, my force was in the X. Very similar to how muscles work. In certain ranges of motion, we're going to gain moment at a detriment of stability. And then we're going to gain stability at a detriment of moment. That's what the trick stuff is going to show us. Trade-offs of everything in life, including our human body. What we gain in stability, we lose in mobility. You don't want to get your car in a wreck? Don't leave the driveway. But the more we move, the more we increase our odds of things happening. How does our body, when we don't want to get injured, we limit mobility. But there's a reason shoulders get hurt more than hips. Because we need to be more mobile up here, and that comes at a cost. We need to be more stable here. Guys, if I dislocate my shoulder, I can run away from a fire. I could save my life if my arm is dislocated. But if my hip is dislocated, I got a problem. You see what I'm trying to say? Especially for our ancestors, like you had a dislocated hip. It's nice knowing you, buddy. We got to keep moving. So we put extra insurance on things that we cannot afford to have injuries for. But what we gain in one, we have to trade off in another. You can't have the best of both worlds. And that includes rotation and linear. Was today helpful? Oh gosh, yeah, we still have a couple minutes. Was today helpful? On the test, all I'm asking you to do is take concepts that we've already introduced to you in 310 and just give it more meaning. That's all. Linear forces influence linear motion. F is equal to ma. Rotational forces influence rotational motion. Moment equals I alpha. You don't need to know that. You just need to know rotational forces influence rotations. Something that is trying to flex you is a rotational force. Flexion or extension is a rotational movement. Flexed, extended, anatomical, that's an angular kinematic variable. Something's trying to flex me, something's trying to extend me, something's trying to left laterally bend me. That's a rotational force variable. Make sense? Because just because it's trying to bend me to the left doesn't mean I'm going to bend to the left. What if I don't have motion? What if I go to the right? Just because it's trying doesn't mean it will. That's why what's trying to make you do something doesn't necessarily match up with what you're doing. Does that make sense? And the reason that is because one is a rotational force variable and the other is a rotational movement variable. That's why those things don't have to match up. And you've heard me say this in 310. We do not associate muscles with specific motions without context. This is why. I can't say, oh, I saw left lateral bending, must be these muscles. I could have that because of these muscles, or I could have that because of these muscles. That's the why. That's opening up the hood and looking at the mechanics from what I'm hoping is a mostly applicable way, without going too far into the weeds. All right, we're good? All right, guys, you have a great weekend.